Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Keep the Line Moving, the podcast designed to talk about leadership, life, and inspiration. I am your host, Chris Gargano, and this isn't just another episode. This is our 30th episode, and for that, I thank you. I appreciate you being part of this each and every week for your great feedback and all of the comments that are generated so we can make this great for you. It's my friend and former colleague, Marty Lyons, who's the color commentator on the radio for the New York Jets. He's paired with Bob Wischusen and that great radio team. But we're going to meet the man behind the mic. What is his purpose now at this stage of his life? He played for Bear Bryant at Alabama. He was drafted in the first round by the New York Jets. He was part of the New York Jets sack exchange from the 80s, you remember. And his life's purpose now with the Marty Lyons Foundation. Their annual golf tournament is at the end of August. We'll give you information in the show notes on that. But let's meet this man who has so much depth. You want to hear this conversation? You're in the right place. It begins now on Keep the Line Moving. You wrote this book, If These Walls Could Talk, because you were very transparent. You took us through everything, your childhood in Florida, through Alabama with Coach Bear Bryant, all the way up to the Jets and the different coaches that you had, and Mr. Hess, the owner, your teammates, the influences your family had, some, very trying times in your life. And you were so open, and you did it all because, let me ask you, why did you write the book?
Well, that's a good question, Chris. I was approached many times about writing a book, and I said, at this point in my life, why would I do that? If you're going to do it, people are expecting you to throw mud, make things dirty in other people's lives, and I'm just not like that. So when I talked to the publishing company out in Chicago, I said the only way I'll do it is to really make it a transparent book, but make it a crossover book, so that I talk about the locker room, I talk about the players, and then I talk about the foundation. And in doing so, they agreed. And this way, I signed over all the proceeds to go to the foundation, not making a dime, gave them the signing bonus, just so that people could understand that, there's more to life than just playing football. And I think that one of the greatest compliments I got about the book was I had a person tell me at times they found themselves laughing. And then they found themselves smiling. And then they found themselves crying. I go,
Yes.
basically, what more could you ask out of a book? Is to get people to understand that there's so much that goes on in everybody's lives that sometimes you have to slow down to realize just how fortunate you are. And then once you find out how fortunate you are, then you find your platform, and then you find your purpose in life. Your purpose in life for me was not to just play football, it was to help terminally ill children. And I think for everyone, once they find that purpose, then they can go on to be successful.
So, Marty, when you look at it and you have this platform, what is it that drives you every day? When you wake up for the foundation and being a great man, a husband, a father, and all, what drives you?
I think the biggest drive is to realize that every day we wake up, there's new challenges. Yesterday's gone, tomorrow's a mystery, but we have today. And when you wake up and you challenge yourself every day to be the best person that you could possibly be, everything's not going to go right, everything's not going to go wrong. But at the end of the day, you have to look at yourself and say, number one, did I get the most out of today? And number two, did I make a difference in somebody's life today? Did I say something that, walk by somebody and they're sitting there and you just go, hey, it's a beautiful day. It might be the only time that day that they actually hear something kind. And working with the kids have really made me open up and understand that when you're not the so-called normal looking person in the crowd, or if you're sitting in a wheelchair, so many people will walk right by you. They don't mean to be mean, but they don't know what to say. So in the lives of those children, it's another day where they feel invisible. And I try not to let anybody feel invisible, because you know what? It's a sad, lonely feeling. And the more that we can include other people in our lives, And the more that we can make them feel important, the rewards go both ways. This life goes both ways. You can give all you want of yourself, and what you get in return, you can't even measure, Chris. You really can't.
And so you exemplify that. So let's back up a little bit. So our relationship, Marty, has been 7 years in the making. And, as my former position, executive producer, vice president with the New York Jets, I oversaw the radio broadcast, and we would have weekly meetings. I'd come into the booth. We'd see each other on road trips. We would laugh. We would always have a fantastic exchange. And you are consistent no matter when it was, whether we were getting ready for a freezing game in Buffalo, whether it was a weekly meeting over this kind of stuff, or it was 2 minutes before a broadcast during the pandemic when you guys were doing your broadcasts at One Jets Drive in our facility. I would come down. It's the middle of the pandemic. All of us, your producer, Joe, Bob, everybody, Gary, we'd all have the engineer, all our wonderful, fantastic coworkers would have our masks on, and it would be the height of the pandemic. And I would come down and we'd lift up our masks, and what would I see but you greeting me with a smile? You would allow everyone to be seen. Marty, at what point, it was at your early days, growing up in Florida or transitioning to Alabama with the influence of Coach Bear Bryant, at what point did this become who you were or who you are, and has it always been who you were?
You know what? I think the foundation has always started within the house. I had strong parents, a father that was a retired police officer, but he believed in discipline. It was the yes, sir, the no, sirs, the please, and the thank you. And he'd give you one chance to correct yourself. And if you didn't correct yourself, he'd come from left field. It didn't matter. He hit you from here all the way down. And his philosophy was that there's going to come a day or a point in your life where you're going to be sitting there and you're going to be respectful to somebody else. And they're going to say, wow, you had good parents that really stressed that. So, I can't thank my parents enough. And then having 4 brothers and 2 sisters, and we didn't have a lot. So we made good of what we did have. And we all went to the same schools, and expectations were the same. If your last name was Lyons, you were going to be an athlete. And being the 4th one to go through the same high school, expectations were real high. I had probably the same coaches that my brothers had. And there was a time that I didn't want to play football. I didn't even like football. And I got ready to quit. My brother Dan, who was 2 years older than me, just said, hey, you can't quit. I'm not allowing you to quit. I kind of laughed at him. I said, Dan, since when do you, as my older brother, allow me to do anything? And he said, the first time you quit in life is going to be the hardest thing you ever do. But then you're going to get used to quitting. And then you're going to get used to making excuses. And you'll continue to quit the rest of your life because it's always somebody else's fault. It's not yours. Now get your ass out of bed. We're going to practice. And that advice he gave me, that was in probably 1973, has stuck with me. When I went to the University of Alabama, there was a bunch of people, Chris, that said, hey, you go there, you'll never play. That's Coach Bryant, Alabama, legendary coach. They go there to win. And as you can see the picture behind me, Joe Namath, Richard Todd, so many players had gone through and played for Coach Bryant. And when I got there, times were tough. And, I'd be lying if I said there was times my freshman and sophomore year, I said, do I really need this? Do I really want this? And I was getting playing time. But Coach Bryant had a philosophy. He was going to put us through practice. And if you were going to quit on yourself or quit on your team, you were going to do it during practice, not during the game. But the biggest thing that kept me going was all those people when I left Pinellas Park, St. Petersburg in 1975 that said I couldn't do it. Because every time that you got weak and you couldn't find that strength, I thought about going back home and saying, hey, yeah, you were right. And it's a lesson again. Don't let anybody tell you you can't do something. Because you know what? A lot of people that envy what you have, they want to see you fail. But you can take those negative thoughts and flip them into something positive. And at the end of it, you go on. Very fortunate. We win a national championship. I was All-American, drafted by the Jets in the first round. I go back home. They're having a Marty Lyons Day, and we're sitting there, and I addressed the crowd, and I said, I just want to thank you. I want to thank the people that didn't think I could do it, because if it wasn't for you, I probably couldn't have done it.
That is the key, right? And you want to say you don't want to be influenced. You always want to go through life ideally to say that I don't care what people think. I'm going to run my own race. However, the way you just phrased it right there, they're in essence riding shotgun with any doubts that you may have, right? So think in terms of us as a vessel going down, and there's us and our doubts, right? And you're saying that in your freshman and sophomore year at Alabama, you had some doubts. You might have wanted to quit or whatever, but it was those people that were driving with you saying, you can't do it. What, the Alabama? Coach Bear Bryant? But together, and then you had the wherewithal and the presence of mind on Marty Lyons Day back in your hometown to thank them for helping you in that drive to succeed. Yeah. I get that, Marty. I totally get that.
Well, you know what, Chris? Everybody's going to be influenced in a positive way or in a negative way. That's why in the world we live in now, we should have started doing it 20 years ago. Choose your words wisely. Make sure that you think before you talk. Make sure that when you talk to teach. And make sure that the biggest thing is you take time to listen. So many of these families, again, it taught me a lesson that they just needed somebody to talk to, and you allow them to talk to you, but you don't ask for anything in return, because we live in a world of let's barter. What I do something for you, what are you going to do for me? The biggest thing that I've learned about commitment is three things. You take the words of a promise, you make it become a reality. I've been with the Lantec Group for 22 years and have never signed a contract. Everything was on a handshake. Everything was, okay, I'll do this for you, you do this for me. Second thing is, when you don't have time, you find time. Because, Chris, everybody's day consists of 24 hours a day. Now, if you want to go to the gym, you carve out that time. But if you don't have time and you make a commitment, you got to find that time. And then the last thing I always say about commitment is, when somebody needs to talk to you, you're there to listen and you don't ask for anything in return. Three things that, again, when I started the foundation in 1982, Bill Gibney said, he was the first president. He said, I will help you start a foundation for terminally ill children underneath two conditions. One, you make a commitment to make it work. And two, it's not a one and done. Don't do it for 1 year and then say, hey, I'm tired of it. Don't do it for your playing days and then your playing days are over and you go, hey, I'm done. When I retired in 91, the only thing that kept me here in New York was the foundation. I couldn't walk out on the kids. I couldn't walk out on the volunteers. I couldn't walk out on the sponsors that, in 91, we were 9 years old, that I could have said, well, my football career is over here in New York. I've got to go on to make a living. So I'm going to move to Alabama. I'm going to move to Florida. No, there was no option. The only option was to stay here, continue with the foundation, and follow the path that God's going to put out there. And the path took me to Payne Weber, then took me to Lantec. And again, being very fortunate to be a part of the Jets organization for 43 years. I don't know many people that can say that, Chris. And you know what? I've had a great time.
When you look back at your own personal journey, it's interesting because in the book, you cite your values, right? And you've now extended these values into the foundation and into your professional life. But let's back up. How did you keep your faith and your values in when you were making that transition into being a pro? And then obviously you've done that with the foundation, but let's talk about your time with the Jets, 11 seasons, part of the New York Sack Exchange. How did you keep your faith and your values during those times when you were a pro?
Well, I would honestly say that there was times where I stubbed my toe, times that, you look back and you go, why did you say that? Why did you do that? Why did you act that way? And it's all life lessons that God gives you another chance, a chance to wake up the next morning. And if you if you're very sincere about it, you go back and you apologize for things that you said, things that you did. Nobody's perfect in this world. I just believe that, family should always comes first, and, right up there behind that, or religion has to play an important part in everybody's life, because there's so much adversity in life that we're all going to face. And the biggest one is losing a loved one, the death of a loved one. How do you overcome a death? Because life's not going to stop for any one of us. But if you don't have faith, if you don't believe that God has put them in a better place, then you struggle to find an answer. 1982, I went through that. I was openly honest that on March 4th, my oldest son was born, and on March 8th, my dad died at the age of 58, and on March 10th, a little boy that I was a big brother to, Keith, died of leukemia at 5.5. I blamed myself. I said, what am I doing wrong in life that God's going to punish me like this? And then all of a sudden, days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. You look at yourself in the mirror and you go, wow, I don't like that image that I'm portraying. I've allowed death to come into my life and say, you know, change me into something I didn't even like. And you realize that every one of us is going to die. Expiration dates, we don't know where, we don't know when. And for the longest time, I blamed God, and I would push myself away. But the more I worked with the kids, the closer I became, the closer I came back. And I realized that, you know, maybe it did take that tragedy, Chris, for me to wake up and understand that, hey, you know what? You're playing in the NFL. That's your platform. It's not your purpose. God gave me the ability to play the game, took me down the right path, took me to Alabama, took me to the Jets, put me in the media capital of the world. And then the tragedies happened. And now all the weight and all the decision was on my shoulders. God was saying to me, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're going to be mad at me the rest of your life, or are you going to do something about it? So, starting the foundation was my vehicle, my answer to the loss of two people that I loved, that I respected, that taught me a great deal. And now you look at it 40 years later, and you've helped over 8,300 families. You're in 13 states. You've raised over $43 million because people started to believe in your mission. They started to see the results of how you can make a difference in somebody's life, and how you can create hope, how you can create memories. And it all happened from a tragedy.
And I can personally thank you for when I was making the transition to do this, right? To start this. And this is about leadership, and you're exemplifying these are the greatest leadership stories someone can hear and learn from. And it's fantastic. But when I was considering this and saying, okay, Marty, I'm really interested in this. I want to help people. I want to get, share leadership stories for people to understand and get better for their leadership journeys. You gave me a talk, and I took notes, and I still have that. And it was the most impactful, on point conversation that I had. And it was boom, boom, boom. And it was exactly what I needed to hear. And that's personal. That's a friend. That's a leader. If you and I were, and I always joke with you and Buttle, if I were in the huddle with you guys, or I always say if I was in the offensive huddle looking across at you guys, that would be very fun. I would more prefer to be a DB or something with you, because you're such a great teammate and positive influence in people's lives, with the foundation, with your Jets teammates, your Alabama teammates, and then your friends. Let me ask you this, Marty. Let's have some fun if we can. I really want to do this. What was it like let's back up and go into the locker room with Alabama, when Coach Bear Bryant would walk into the room? What was his aura? What was he like as a leader? How did he influence the room and make you guys do what you did?
Well, I think the number one thing is, when he walked in the room, there was such a great deal of respect for him. You could hear a pin drop. I don't care if it was loud. As soon as he walked in the room, and he was bigger than life. He had great vision for every one of his players. He knew that there were some players that could be good enough to move on and play in the NFL. And he knew that there were some players that were only going to play 4 or 5 years, depending if you got redshirted at Alabama. But he knew that if he took all the core values and instilled them in the players and taught us how to not just listen to them, but live them and understand them, that when our playing days were over, we could all go on and be successful in our community, in our work, in our marriages, and as a father. He was something special, Chris. He was, and for most of the players, you don't realize it until after you left. And all those life lessons that he would teach you and talk about and prepare you. I remember going back again, that tragedy. You know, when I went in to tell Coach Bryant I was dropping out of school in 1979, I just played in the East-West Shrine game. I played in the Senior Bowl. And it was the first time that it started to set in that, you know what, you're going to be drafted. And we don't know how high, but you're going to be drafted. Um, so I went in to tell Coach Bryant that I was going to prepare for the NFL draft by working out. I was going to drop out of school. Now, Coach Bryant believed in education. He didn't want anybody dropping out of school. But I finally got the courage up. I went in there. He was sitting at his massive desk. And I said, Coach, if I could sit and talk to you for a little bit. He gestured. I sat on the couch. And I said, Coach, I'm going to get ready for the NFL. I think I got a chance to play. I'm going to drop out of school. And I'm going to start working out for the NFL. And he looked at me and he said, Marty, just make me one promise. He stuck his hand out. He said, just promise me one day you'll come back and you'll finish up your degree. And I went, yes, sir. And I shook his hand. And he said, also remember, he goes, a winner in the game of life is that person that gives of themselves so others can grow. Now, he told me that, Chris. My
Yeah.
mind was blank. It went in one ear. It got stuck in the middle. But I never thought about that saying till I went through that tragedy. And I said, this is it, man. This is that moment Coach Bryant was preparing you for. A winner in the game of life is the person that gives of themselves so others can grow. It's not about me, not about you, Chris. It's about the gifts that we have, and we can give them and share them with other people so that their life, they can feel better about who they are. And it came up like that. And it was laying dormant for about 4 years. And it was just those special moments. And then, of course, all my kids are, getting older. In the back of my mind, I still think about the words of integrity. I shook this man's hand. Coach Bryant died January 26, 83. There was only two people that knew that, Coach Bryant and myself. So my kids are going through school, and I go, you know what? I got to go back and get my degree. I tried to go back, and something would come up, and they said, well, orientation is the middle of August. Like, sorry, I got a jet game. They
Right.
go, all right,
Right.
you can come in September. I go, oh, sorry, I'm the keynote speaker for this and that. So I remember one of the associates down at Alabama said, are you coming back to get your degree to make more money in your career? I go, no, I'm coming back because I made a promise to Coach Bryant. So now I'm ready to graduate in 2016. My daughters graduate in May of 2016. So the guy comes to me again. He goes, hey, you know what? This would be special if we fast tracked you on these last 3 hours and you graduated with your daughter in May. And I looked at the guy and I said, I don't want to graduate with my daughter. I know it would be a special moment, but why would I take away her special moment and make it mine? So the guy said, well, then you're going to have to wait till December. He goes, do you think you can wait 6 more months? I went, do you understand? I've waited 41 years. It doesn't matter.
Right.
So in December 2016, whole family was there. Went down. walked in the robe, graduated, and right after the graduation, drove to Birmingham, took a red eye out to San Francisco, and did the Jets 49ers game the next day.
And you know what? We were there. We have videos. We did stories on that. You know that. We
Oh,
did a story
you
on it.
know, yeah, Chris, that's when you know that the organization cares about you.
Yep.
That you guys sent a whole camera crew down there to record it, to make it not just a special moment for myself and my family, but a special moment for the extended family, the Jets, the fans, to say, hey, simply, you know what? Live your life with integrity. If you say you're going to do something, do it.
When you think of a great leader, somebody who has impacted you, and you've talked about them, but when now you're a leader, you've always been a leader, but now you have perspective. When you think about a great leader on the field, who comes to mind? And then when I ask you the best leader you've ever seen, period, football, outside of football or business, who comes to mind? So it's two questions: best
Well,
leader on the field, best leader, period.
first of all, Chris, I think everybody has the qualities to be a good leader. It's just whether you want to hold yourself accountable. Mr. Hess once said, sometimes you don't choose to be a leader. Sometimes people just choose to follow you. So the best leader that I've ever played with would probably be Joe Klecko, because Joe Klecko kept himself and held himself accountable and made sure we were ready to play every single week. I look at my life, and there's been so many leaders, from the coaches to my parents to my brothers to some of the young kids from the foundation, that, like Stephen, he was only 17, died of a brain tumor. And the first day I met him, he said, I reached up, gave him a hug, and said, Stephen, you keep fighting. Everything's going to be all right. He goes, I know it is. He goes, I'm going to go to heaven. So there's a leader, a 17-year-old young man saying, hey, don't fear death if you have faith. The second time I went in there to see him, I was with Herm Edwards. And at the end of the conversation, Herm goes, well, Stephen, if there's anything we can do for you, you let Marty know and we'll do it. And Stephen said, well, my dad is really the big Jet fan. Can you call him? And Herm went over and took the house phone and called him. And on the way back, I said to Herm, I said, isn't it amazing what we can learn from these kids? I said, you ask the kid, whatever you want, Stephen, just let me know, Marty. And instead of thinking of himself, he thought of his father, which was a leadership quality to say, it's not about me. If I have a chance to make somebody else feel important, it's my responsibility to do that. Stephen ended up dying less than 2 months later. I got a call from the social workers. Social workers, I would always see them as I would go in and out. And I said, if anything happens, let me know. My phone rang early in the morning, Chris. Said, we have a situation. Stephen has passed away. The family is financially stressed. They don't have money for a funeral. I said, well, how much money do you need and how long do I have? They said, well, we can give you a couple hours, then we need $9,000. I said, all right. So I'm sitting at my desk at Lantec, and I've only been at Lantec, maybe a year or so. So I'm getting to feel out the owners. And one of the owners, Mike Ryan, came in and said, hey, man, what's the matter? You don't look it. So I told him the story. And he looked at me across the desk. He goes, so what are you going to do? I said, well, what do you mean, Mike? He goes, no. What are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to try to find some donors. He goes, no, stop. He goes, what are you going to do? And I went, Mike, I really don't know. He goes, well, it's a pretty easy solution. He goes, I'll give you $3,000. My partner will give you $3,000. And you write a check for $3,000. There's $9,000. We're done. To this day, Chris, the best $3,000 I've ever spent, because it just proved the point that I always tell people. You can always make more money. You can't make more time. I don't want to miss anything in life. I try to slow it down, try to enjoy it, try to share it, try to give people friendly advice so that their lives can be a little bit better. That's being a leader.
I love it. I love it, Marty. Let's end it there. You can't get any better than that. Marty, this is fantastic. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed having you. I love learning from you. I love listening to you. I love sharing commonalities and expressing, what is important to you is, I think, very, very valuable for everyone to hear. So I appreciate it. You've had a great career and you're still going.
Well, thank you, Chris. And our special friendship will always continue. And like I always, during those phone calls, always give like a quote. And I said, Charlie Chaplin once said, a day without laughter is a day wasted.
Yep.
So, let's laugh, let's smile, let's enjoy life. And I'm happy you're doing what you're doing because believe it or not, you don't realize it now, you're making a difference. And one day, 5, 10 years from now, somebody's going to come by and say, you know what, Chris, that podcast you did with that former football player that looked old, I forget his name. He goes, you made an impact on my life. That's what you want, Chris. You want to make an impact, not just an impression, because impressions are there for a moment and then they're gone. You make an impact, you change the way people think, you change the way people act, and they will come back in your life, trust me, and tell you that, Christopher Gargano, you made a difference.
Thank you, Marty. Could not appreciate it more. Thanks for doing this, and I will see you soon, my friend. Thank you.
You got it, buddy. Thank you very much. Go Jets.
And we thank Marty very much for being on the show. And my number one takeaway is this: time. Taking advantage of the time we have. Marty had 2 quotes: you can't make more time, and I don't want to miss anything in life. So if you look at his history and what he shared with us, he played collegiately at Alabama for Bear Bryant. He was drafted by the New York Jets, and he's now using his platform in football to help people, to help the kids as part of the Marty Lyons Foundation. So he is using his time to serve. Everybody, thank you very much for being part of this conversation. For Paul Salazar, our podcast producer, we thank you for being part of Keep the Line Moving each and every week. We'll see you next time, everybody. Have a great week.
We thank you for listening to Keep the Line Moving. We would love it if you subscribed or left a review. For more podcast episodes, check out our YouTube page. If you'd like to work with the Gargano Leadership Group, check out our website. This has been a GLG production, copyright 2023. For our podcast producer, Paul Salazar, and our marketing coordinator, Savin Narwal. Have a great week, everyone.